I watched Alex stand in front of the mirror, toothbrush in one hand and ambition in the other, and I couldn't help but notice the look that says, "Today I will maybe sorta try." Identity isn't a poster on the wall, I told him, though he did consider one with a motivational llama. And it's definitely not what you whisper to yourself while you floss. What you believe about who you are quietly writes your days. So let's rewrite Alex's internal script for my try-am. I suggested to Alex a tiny rewrite. Swap "I'm trying to exercise" with "I'm someone who moves daily," and watched him attempt the words like a new accent. Changing identity is not grand theatrics. It's the accumulation of small, believable statements you can actually live with. Otherwise, your brain objects like a bored referee. Alex grimaced, said it out loud, and then did a suspiciously committed toe tap. That toe tap was momentum in disguise. I reminded Alex that belief leads behavior more often than we credit, which made him say, "So my brain is lazy and persuasive?" I told him yes, but persuasive brains can be negotiated with kindness, cues, and evidence, little wins that prove the new identity is real. To make that proof obvious, we needed to create moments where Alex could say, "See, that was me," and mean it. We picked a simple, silly cue for Alex. His running shoes by the door would no longer be decorative. They were now his handshake with the day. It sounds trivial until you see Alex automatically bend to tie a lace and then puff at his chest like a tiny hero whenever a shoe knot is complete. Those tiny rituals become anchors. You don't decide to be someone, you trigger being someone. And Alex was low-key enjoying the cape effect. Then came the test, a rainy morning and the siren call of the snooze button. Alex faced it with the solemnity of someone negotiating with a bouncer at a nightclub. I narrated his internal monologue out loud, because if you don't say your identity, it stays a whisper, and he muttered, "I'm someone who moves daily," which is 70% courage and 30% grammar. He dragged his shoes into the hallway, and I swear the floorboards cheered. By the end of the chapter, Alex made a small promise to himself, not dramatic, more like a sticky note you actually read. Move 10 minutes daily. I explained that identity needs commitments that are believable and repeatable. Otherwise, your brain will file them under fantasy exercises. Alex scribbled it on a sticky note and stuck it to the mirror, sealing the deal with a flourish that only he could call art. I had to explain to Alex that a cue is like a tiny stage direction. Your brain follows, lights go up, you enter. He nodded as if this made perfect sense, then promptly tried to enter dramatically and tripped over his own feet still. A cue was born. Good cues are obvious, repeatable, and tied to specific contexts, so your brain stops deciding and starts following habit choreography. We mapped Alex's day and tucked cues into ordinary moments. Coffee cup equals 5 push-ups. Work break equals a brisk hallway lap, so habit formation felt convenient, not heroic. He loved the coffee cue because coffee is sacred, which made me question his priorities and then quietly agree with them. Designing cues around what you already do is like hijacking your routine for good. Alex called it friendly sabotage. I insisted that cues should be simple, no treasure map required, because complexity kills repetition faster than a cat kills ambition. Alex attempted to create a cue with a 3-step ritual involving a bell, a dramatic clap, and a spreadsheet, which I vetoed on aesthetic grounds. Keep cues obvious, sight, sound, or location that's hard to miss, and your brain will stop sending polite excuses. I taught Alex about tiny wins, the microscopic victories that make identity believable when piled high enough to form a hill. He cheerfully did 3 squats and high-fived himself like it was a peak summit. I called that behaviorally efficient and emotionally clever. The secret is consistency over intensity. 10 tiny climbs beat 1 epic struggle when it comes to wiring your sense of self. We rearranged Alex's apartment like a curious stage designer. Weights by the TV, mat next to the door, water bottle in plain sight, because environments speak louder than intentions. Alex marveled at how often he almost followed his environment now, which was both comforting and slightly dramatic to witness. Change the scenery, and your brain's script runs differently. Less debate, more doing. Finally, I taught Alex an implementation intention. When X happens, I will do Y, which he practiced in theatrical voice like a low-budget superhero oath. He loved the clarity it created. No mental salad of options, just a clear path from cue to action, and I celebrated his newfound decisiveness. Planning the exact response to a trigger eliminates the guesswork and leaves your identity to quietly get on with the job. I told Alex motivation is like weather, sometimes sunny, sometimes a thunderstorm, and often inconveniently scheduled for Tuesday evenings. He asked if we could install indoor sunshine, and I said no, but we can build umbrellas called systems. Systems outlive mood swings. When you are prepared, you don't need to wait for sparkle, you just follow the routine you built the night before. We made Alex's workouts ridiculously easy at first. 2 push-ups, a 90-second walk, 5 breaths of purposeful breathing, because starting small is a stealth strategy. He did the 2 push-ups, looked perplexed, and then beamed as if he'd cracked a secret code. That grin was proof the strategy works. Simplicity removes friction, and friction is the notorious thief of good intentions. Habit stacking is like appending a new habit onto an old one. So Alex put ankle swings after brushing his teeth, and suddenly had 2 hygienic behaviors. He called it brushing and bouncing, which I judged harshly, and then secretly respected for creativity. This technique glues the new to the familiar and is especially magical when life is hectic and your willpower's on vacation. I explained that goals are directional and systems are the road you drive on, which made Alex ask whether roads require snacks. They do not, but consistent systems do require planning, so we built a weekly routine with flexible slots to accommodate life's chaos. He loved the map metaphor, mostly because maps imply treasure and he's always been susceptible to hidden treasure. To conquer the starting problem, we invented a tiny start ritual for Alex. Deep breath, 5-second smile, and stand-up mini cues that signal workout now. He performed it with comic solemnity, and it created a Pavlovian shift. The ritual felt like a key that unlocked action. Rituals remove decision fatigue. They short-circuit debate and gently usher you into doing. I introduced temptation bundling. Pair something you love, like a guilty pleasure podcast, with a habit you resist, like brisk walking. And Alex suddenly looked at his headphone cord like it was matchmaking. For years, he'd loved both audio dramas and procrastination separately. Married them, and they started producing obedient workouts. This is behavioral economics doing romance. You get productive outcomes by pairing pleasure with discipline. I had to tell Alex that discipline isn't a grim dictator. It's more like a friendly librarian who reminds you where you left your best version. He pictured a librarian in sweatpants and that image stuck, which I regret and secretly adore. Discipline is practice applied repeatedly, boring, sometimes, but astonishingly effective. So we set out to make practice enjoyable enough to repeat. I reminded Alex that a little every day beats a lot once in a while, which he accepted like a man discovering the joys of leftover pizza. He started logging 5-minute sessions and found they compounded into real progress, which made him high-five me and then immediately wonder if that counts as cardio. Consistency is the slow-acting compound interest of improvement. Boring but profoundly wealthy. We made a rule: show up and do something imperfect rather than wait for perfect conditions. Alex called it practicing beautifully, which sounded like a yoga class that infiltrated his vocabulary. He did squats with questionable form, and I praised the showmanship anyway, because imperfect practice beats perfect procrastination. Learning is messy, and identity grows from repetition, not flawless execution. I suggested gentle accountability, a weekly check-in with a friend, or a quick voice memo to oneself, and Alex picked the voice memo option because he likes hearing his own pep talks. Accountability isn't punishment, it's a feedback loop that gently nudges you back, like a good GPS that tolerates wrong turns. We made the check-ins low drama and high compassion so Alex didn't feel like he was reporting to a drill sergeant. We redefined failure as data, not identity demolition, which Alex appreciated until the first misstep when he dramatically declared the living room a crime scene. I taught him to ask, "What happened and what will I try next?" instead of, "Am I broken?" That tiny shift keeps you curious and reduces shame, making it easier to return to practice rather than retreat forever. I told Alex to celebrate the ritual more than the result a cup of tea after a mini workout, a 5-minute stretch song, or a funny sticker on his calendar, and he promptly designed a sticker system featuring tiny tacos, rewards for progress, make the process pleasurable and sustainable. And yes, tacos count as valid motivational currency in my book. Over time, the habit becomes its own reward, but early on, be kind and creative. Sketched a morning blueprint for Alex. Wake, hydrate, 2-minute movement, and a protein snack. Nothing heroic, everything practical. He made it into a little checklist and treated each tick like currency, which is a delightful personality trait I fully endorse. Creating a blueprint reduces friction and frees up willpower for real decisions that matter later in the day. We practiced evening prep, clothes ready, shoes by the door, and a quick 5-second mental note of the next day's intention, which Alex declared was like tucking his future self into bed. This tiny prep eliminates morning decision fatigue and makes the cue obvious, so when the alarm sounds, your system is already in motion. He got into bed feeling smug and organized, and yes, smugness fuels consistency too. I taught Alex to use weekly templates designated days for strength, walking, mobility, and rest so he stopped debating what to do and simply followed the plan. He liked the template because it made life feel architected instead of chaotic, which fed his inner planner and calmed his inner procrastinator. Templates create predictable variety, keeping things interesting while still automated. We added flexibility to the structure if mornings fail. Midday micro-sessions were acceptable and guilt-free, which Alex appreciated because his mornings are sometimes theatrical. The point was not rigidity but reliability. The system adapts so the identity persists, even when life goes sideways. Flexibility ensures sustainability. You don't break the chain, you bend it, like a willow, not a twig. Reused simple automation tools, phone reminders, habit apps, and one calendar alert labeled "Be the Person Who Moves," which felt like setting gentle alarms for his future identity. Alex grinned at that alert, then promptly changed its ringtone to a jaunty kazoo because he insisted on adding personality to productivity. Automation reduces reliance on memory, and memory is famously unreliable when Netflix is nearby. Finally, I encouraged Alex to make the process enjoyable, play upbeat songs, track progress visually, or invite a friend to join because joy is glue for habits. He chose a playlist called Shoe Tying Anthems, which I judged silently and then added to my own library. If the routine isn't at least a little fun, it won't survive the daily test of willpower and distractions. I told Alex tracking isn't about tyranny. It's about feedback. You can't steer a ship you can't see the course of. He started logging tiny wins and discovered that cumulative data makes consistency visible and satisfying, like counting tiny coins of confidence. Tracking helps you notice patterns, celebrate progress, and make small adjustments without melodrama. We kept Alex's tracking simple. 1 line per day, did you move? And a tiny note for context, which satisfied his need for data without turning life into a spreadsheet horror film. He's not a data scientist. He's a human who benefits from simple visual proof. Simple tracking reduces resistance and increases the likelihood of follow-through. I advise Alex to measure what actually moved the needle: consistency, minutes active, mood improvements, not vanity metrics or sporadic victories that feel important but aren't. He nearly measured his snack-to-water ratio, and I gently redirected him to metrics that matter for long-term habit formation. Focused tracking shows progress in the ways that reinforce identity rather than creating noise. We built a 5-minute weekly reflection ritual where Alex reviewed the week's wins and decided one small tweak for next week, which made him feel like a wise research scientist of his own life. He kept it light and curious, not punitive, and that tiny ritual prevented small problems from growing into identity crises. A short reflection is a compass check that keeps your systems honest and working. I warned Alex about comparing his start to someone else's middle. Social media is a curated highlight reel, and his brain is too impressionable to trust it. He agreed and then immediately compared his playlist to someone else's playlist. So we gently laughed and moved on. Comparison kills identity building because it asks you to measure worth against curated versions of other people, which is unfair and exhausting. We use the tracking as a celebration tool more than a judgment tool. Small celebrations for streaks, improvements in energy, or just showing up. And Alex invented a victory dance that was both alarming and delightful. Celebrating raises the emotional payoff for consistency, which solidifies identity in a way data alone cannot. Make tracking a source of encouragement, not punishment. I told Alex the truth up front. There will be dips, vacations, illness, and days when a sofa is more persuasive than your identity. He nodded solemnly and then immediately made a plan to be dramatic about his dips, which I admired for commitment. Expecting setbacks removes their power to derail you. They become temporary chapters, not the entire story. When Alex fell off his routine, we used quick recovery techniques. One easy movement right away, then a tiny plan for tomorrow, plus one empathic note to self. He liked the simplicity. It felt like hitting a reset button without scolding your future self. Recovery is about momentum restoration, not punishment, so pick gentle moves that rebuild identity evidence fast. I modeled compassionate language for Alex. What happened? Instead of, why did you fail? And he tried it out loud with surprising tenderness. Self-compassion lets you learn without spiraling into shame, which is way more useful for long-term change. The more you treat setbacks like data, the more likely you are to return and keep building identity. Life will change jobs, moves, relationships, and I coached Alex on adapting systems instead of abandoning identity when schedules shift. He practiced mini plans for travel and busy weeks and found that identity flexes when systems do, like a well-designed elastic band. Maintaining identity during change requires creativity, not stubbornness, and Alex turned into a particularly creative elastic band. I reminded Alex that identity is a lifelong journey, not a finish line, and he cheered as though this meant infinite opportunities for celebratory snacks. We talked about integrating fitness into who he is rather than something he does in phases, and he adored the idea of being forever someone who moves more than a summer miracle. Over years, small, consistent choices compound into the person you become. We ended with a simple identity check-in for Alex. Who do I want to be today? And a tiny action that proves it, which he committed to, like a pirate accepting a map. That question reframes decisions all day long and helps you choose behaviors that align with your chosen identity. Alex promised to ask it every morning, and I promised to tease him gently if he forgot. Support with sarcasm, my specialty.